My son called me at 9:05 on January 26th and said, "Mom, do you know where Dad is?"
And of course, you never think something like this is ever going to happen either.
It's torture. I feel like someone is killing me, but just not finishing the job.
Would somebody keep him hostage this long? Because he would never not pick up a phone if he had a phone to call us.
That was the family of missing person Robert Barron, and in case you couldn't tell from the phrases they were saying and the emotion behind them, it seems like they're worried that the worst has happened, that we're not just looking at a missing persons investigation, but actually a homicide case. And they have good cause for those concerns, especially we're 5 years down the line, and there were some things left at the scene of his disappearance that would make anyone worried. This family needs help. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Robert Barron. Welcome back to Brain Scratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today and for caring about these cases like I do. Let's get started by learning about where this takes place and how this area actually has special ties to Robert and his passion, especially for his business. Old Forge is a borough in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. The population was 8,524 as of the 2020 census. It's located about 5 miles southwest of downtown Scranton, Pennsylvania. And it's not often that in the contents here at Wikipedia you would see, under history, pizza. Let's learn about that. Immigrants from Italy arrived in the early 1900s to work in the coal mines. The Italian immigrants were treated poorly and often the subject of discrimination. The 1960s and 70s saw the growth of what has become the borough's trademark, the pizza business. The origins of selling pizza are believed to be rooted within the Gigerelli family, when Mrs. Gigerelli used to serve her homemade pizza to coal miners who gathered to play cards. Apparently, the coal miners fell in love with this food that was very easy to take in for lunch the next day as well. It's kind of an oval-shaped pizza, and the pieces are cut into squares. I don't know if that was part of why they were cut into squares, so it was easy to pack in when they were going into the coal mines the next day. And of course, you don't have to reheat it to have it for lunch the next day. So that's part of kind of the culture that started pizza being so important in this area. And here at the Google Street View is Gigerelli's. This was a restaurant that Robert's family actually bought in the early 1960s, so right around the boom from all this, but obviously named after this family that started this trend in this area. And even here on the Google Street View, this is from September 2019, we can see a big sign on the front of the business, "Please help find Robert Barron." The business is closed as of the news reports I was seeing. I believe it's still closed as of right now based on what I'm seeing online as well. And there's a new little message that's been scribbled into the bottom of this poster. We'll get to that by the end of the episode. But let's learn a little bit more about this man. You can see him here. Looks very happy, working in his kitchen, making pizza for people. Let's stop at NamUs and learn about Robert Scott Barron. Date of last contact was January 25th, 2017. He went missing at the age of 58. He would now be 63 years old. Just take a moment and think about a loved one in your life and not having them around for their last 5 birthdays and not knowing if they're still alive or not. That's what this family is facing. He's a father of 3. He's a husband. He's a fixture in the community from what I've also seen, missing from a lot of people's lives. He stands at 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighs around 185 pounds. And for the circumstances of disappearance, I don't think I've ever seen one this lean before at NamUs. It says suspicious, foul play suspected. That's all that it says here. So we're going to have to look at some other sources to get a bit of a better understanding of what happened leading up to his disappearance. For physical description, they're just saying gray or partially gray hair. Even this stuff, hazel eyes, he wears glasses, but that's it. That's all we get for physical description. No distinctive physical features. Clothing and accessories, they do say that he was wearing black sweatpants, a gray hooded sweatshirt, and black sneakers. They also have part of a transportation profile filled out, but not like the make, the model. There's kind of a reason for that. We'll get into that as we're rolling forward here. But something else really interesting about this profile that I've noticed, I can't think of another one where I've seen the actual case owner under the investigating agencies listed as the district attorney's office. Very frequently, it's the local police department, it's the local sheriff's office. But I have never seen a DA be listed as the primary investigating agency here. And it's kind of interesting because as we go through the articles, you're going to see it for yourself. The DA is kind of a very prominent person when it comes to interacting with the public about this case. I've seen that happen in ways before, but not where the DA was kind of solely, the only person that was really talking to the public about the case. And in this instance, I'm not seeing a whole lot of quotes. I think we might have a few, but not a lot from, local law enforcement, investigators that are working the case. We do have a mayor that kind of talks at one point a little bit about this case, but that's about it. So it's just different. I'm not sure why this case is being handled that way. Maybe it has to do with the makeup of law enforcement in that area, this being a borough. Maybe the law enforcement department isn't very big, or maybe the DA's office has the investigative resources that the local PD doesn't, so those things roll up to them. I don't know. I've never quite seen it like this before, but let's get back to learning about Robert and what happened around his disappearance. A big thank you to Megan over at the Charlie Project for her excellent work. Barron was last seen in Old Forge, Pennsylvania at 10 p.m. on January 25th, 2017. Now, from what his wife says, it was a little bit later than that. He had left their home like around 10:20, 10:25 p.m. on that night. He was expecting to drive his son home, drop his son off, and then he was going to go to the shop, and there was actually an apartment upstairs that he would stay in at the shop. He did that because the next morning, well, in the mornings typically, the dough delivery would happen, and he had to be there to receive it. After leaving his pizza restaurant, Gigerelli's, he dropped off his son at his apartment in town. His son worked with him, and both daughters lived away from home. Barron didn't return home that night, and his wife assumed he'd spent the night at the apartment above Gigerelli's. So that's an interesting note as well. I don't know if this was planned, but occasionally, apparently he would stay there, so it was just kind of understood that if he didn't show up at home, he's probably sleeping at work. He often stayed there overnight so he can accept delivery of pizza dough, which arrived at 7 a.m. each day. He was supposed to pick up his son the next morning, but never arrived at his son's apartment and didn't respond to calls or texts. When his son went to the restaurant, he found the pizza dough delivery sitting outside, untouched, which is uncharacteristic of Barron's behavior. Apparently, the start of their day was get the dough, start processing the dough right off the bat so that they were set up for the day, even before they would really do anything else. So him and his son, that was just their kind of typical pattern. So to see that pattern not happen on this day was obviously an indicator that something was wrong. WNEP.com points out that Robert isn't the only thing that's missing. 58-year-old Robert Barron is being searched for by Old Forge police. He could be driving a silver Hyundai Elantra. So his vehicle also missing. It would be found. We'll get to those details. Continuing with another article, the investigation seems centered inside the family restaurant. Detectives were seen carrying out something that looked like a laptop. All this has led some to believe that Robert Barron may be more than just missing. Quote, I will say that in conjunction with the Pennsylvania State Police, we did conduct an investigation looking for potential evidence. Again, right now it's a missing persons case, said Lackawanna County District Attorney Shane Scanlon. And there's a start of the DA really being kind of the mouthpiece for this. We don't have any evidence of him being dead. We certainly have not found a body. If anyone out in the public has any information, please give the Lackawanna County Communications Center a call, said DA Scanlon. So something seems to have happened back in the pizza shop. 4 days after his disappearance, they do find the car. Here in a post from January 30th, 2017, the Lackawanna County District Attorney's Office confirms to Eyewitness News they have found the car on Howard Street. It appears there was blood stains inside the car as well as on the right driver's side door. Obviously, a lot of concern since we're now hearing about blood stains being left here. So this is 511 South Main Street. This is where the pizzeria is. And this is just Google's driving directions for getting to Howard Street. Pretty much a straight shot down Main Street until a little bit of a turnoff that happens right here on Bridge Street. And the thing that's kind of scary about Howard Street's location is we are awful close to the Lackawanna River. Let's go ahead and get the street view going so we can kind of see if there's any reason why this car would wind up down here. And there is a little bit of a side road that you see here that kicks off towards the river. Now there is a gate. It does look like it's closed as of this. This is a street view from 2012. So I don't know how far down here the car could have gone. It was noted that the car was found with mud all over the tires. And this, if this is wet, depending on the time of year, just it driving in this, I think, could have some of that mud transfer happen there. I do see this is, well, there's a gate here, but obviously it's not done very well. Here's a big separation, and someone could certainly get to the water from here if they wanted to. In terms of the river itself, I don't know if this is really the type of source that, assuming the worst, would this be the type of place that you would try to hide someone? I don't know. And I also don't know if this level changes as the year goes on. Kind of looks like, based on the foliage, it might get a little thicker, maybe perhaps the winter, through the winter months. I don't know, but it doesn't look like a raging river, where you could expect to put something into it and it would be carried off. Especially with all these rocks, there's a lot of things that look like they could hang up something that was coming down the river. So Howard Road, back into here, it ends just right up here, not very far. And all of this is very close to the pizza parlor. I mean, we're not even, they said it was close to a mile away. Google's bringing it up as 0.7 of a mile, which for me kind of brings up the question of, is there some reason why the car has to be this close to where this has happened? Is the person that's driving the car now on foot? I don't know. I think it's something that should certainly be considered. Another thing is this a situation where there's more than one perpetrator? If so, could someone have followed the car there? The car was dropped off. They got in the other person's car and they took off from there. Something along those lines. We've got a lot of different possibilities with this case because honestly, there's a lot of questions. We have some good details to go over, but there's a lot of questions about those details that just don't seem to get cleared up very easily. Family members of Robert Barron were emotional 5 days after his disappearance. Friends organized a search effort in the Old Forge area, hoping to find some sign that Barron is safe, or at the very least, give the family some closure. Dozens of volunteers headed out. That search wrapped up around 4 p.m. with no word on if anything was found. Police searched the restaurant and found traces of blood, some that they said had been removed with cleaning supplies. They also found a tooth in a sink, as well as a bloody Afghan. I'm curious about these details because the details of what the police found in the pizzeria are now coming out 5 days later. I don't know if this is stuff that they initially saw on the first day when they got called and wound up in there, or if this is stuff that came out through later analysis for some reason. If there was some reason why, like if the blood, we are going to find out they did use luminol, but I don't know if there was enough blood for them to identify, oh, okay, something obviously happened in here, or if they had to bring in the luminol test and then they saw, okay, something definitely happened in here. It's interesting to me that we have this kind of gap in terms of this information coming out. Pretty important information for a missing persons investigation. It certainly pushes things in a different direction. I know you're probably also wondering, is the blood and tooth confirmed to be his? It would take testing in a couple of months, but yes, they are confirmed to actually belong to Robert. I have also seen some mention that hair was also found at the scene, but really no details on it, and no mention of if that was tested, does that come back to him? I'm only seeing it mentioned in a few places. I know it's been days. We have cold weather. With the negative things we've been hearing, it doesn't look good, but we have to have high hopes. Bobby's a fighter, said family friend Jason Thomas. According to the search warrant, an employee at Barron's restaurant saw him get multiple phone calls one day last week. Then Barron said, "Don't answer the phone anymore." Kind of interesting to tell an employee working at the pizza place, don't answer the phone, and especially after it seems like he's being harassed by these phone calls. I don't have any additional information on this. I can't imagine if this was someone that was like pranking the pizza place that, he would say, okay, don't answer the phone anymore. I mean, they're still doing business there. I'm pretty sure they're going to answer the phone. That's probably one of the primary ways that people get their orders in. So for him to say that leads me to believe that these phone calls might have been a bit more serious. Something else might be going on here. That's one leg of this investigation where this is all the detail that's out there about that. And the family really hasn't made any comments about there being anyone in particular that would want to harm him. To the contrary, it seems like from family and friends and people in the neighborhood, everyone's like, this guy is so sweet and gentle. Like, we can't imagine that anyone would even consider him an enemy, let alone do something like this to him. We know, if nothing else, he was brutally attacked in his business. So what would lead to that? This is kind of a strong indicator. I'm wondering about where those phone calls are coming from. I don't know in terms of the investigation if it's led anywhere, because here we are 5 years later and we're still looking at this as unsolved, and we still don't know where Robert is. His daughter, Nicole Barron, told ABC News Today, "We just want some answers." The restaurant owner was reported missing on January 26th by his son, Bobby. The younger Barron, a partner in the family business, told police his father was supposed to pick him up. Bobby Barron told police he texted his father around 7:40 a.m. to tell him he was ready to go, and after he didn't get a response, Bobby walked to the restaurant. He went inside, found his father not there and items out of place, so he called the police. And even that's just interesting phrasing to me. Like, if Bobby walked in there and he noticed there's blood all over the place, that's a bit of a different description, I think, than, Bobby saw some items out of place and then he called the police. And especially because this article is coming out after the information's already been released about the scene. So I'm kind of curious about how this is all unfolding, and especially how obvious the attack was in the shop. There's also a big question of, they mentioned that it seemed like someone tried to clean it up. If we're looking at possible motives here, would someone if this was a simple robbery, are they going to stay around after and try to clean it up? I don't know. Authorities used luminol, which uncovered evidence that a possible attack occurred and was attempted to be cleaned with household cleaners left at the scene. That was written in the search warrant. So once again, that's just leading me to believe that there was enough of a cleaning job done that they either didn't understand the full scope of the attack, or maybe even that there was an attack at all. Maria Barron told investigators that they have an apartment above the restaurant where her husband stays occasionally. She told investigators she checked the apartment and she saw a comforter from the bed was missing. And then she also found an Afghan in the bar area of the restaurant, which she said was very odd. Obviously, it was a place where that Afghan wouldn't usually be. Bobby Barron told police his father's cell phone was left in the kitchen. So obviously with missing persons cases, cell phones, very important, usually pretty easy to trace, especially if it's in an area that has decent coverage. Not going to help us in this case if it was left behind at the scene outside of being investigated in terms of who Bobby could have been talking to. Was someone harassing him on that phone line as well? Is there any trace of that? All that type of information. As a matter of fact, it sounds like the mother contacted one of the daughters asking, "Do you know your father's code for his phone?" Because they were trying to get into it to see what was going on when they found the phone. Nicole Barron said her father was a low-key family person who didn't bother a soul. "I can't fathom who would go in there and bother him," she said. So we're talking a pretty small community, a prominent fixture in the community. One of the news segments I was watching, they had cut to either a reporter or a pre-recorded piece, And the live reporter in the studio, they left his mic on accident, and you could hear him say, as this other piece started, he's like, "Oh, I've been to that place." Like, apparently this was a fixture in this community. When you have something like this happen around that, the rumor mill spins up. And this case, certainly no different. Now, I've seen, and I just want to touch on this stuff because there's a conversation that we have to have about it, and the mayor is actually going to step up to try to help us have this conversation. But some of the rumors I've seen that there was some form of gambling debts that Robert might have owed. I'm not seeing anything that has been formally reported to support anything like that he had gambling issues, anything along those lines. One of the big rumors that is spinning around very, very hard is involvement on his son's part. I've seen a few interviews with his son. I'm not a human lie detector, but I'm not getting any sense that his son has anything to hide. He's very open in terms of doing the press early on. But when we're talking about some of the logistics here, like if this was a homicide investigation, if we knew all out that this was a homicide investigation, we know that a couple of things they look for in particular is who called it in to police and who was the last person to be seen with them. Who fits the bill for both of those in this case? It is Bobby. So just from the stats of, basic homicide investigation, would he be someone to be investigated? Yes. And at this point so far, we haven't heard of any hard investigation that's really aiming towards him. Coming up, there's a couple of steps that lead me to believe that they're at least looking at the possibility. That doesn't mean that he's a person of interest or a suspect from their point of view. Maybe they're doing these steps in the investigation to actually rule him out. But one of the things that's tough about this is it seems like a very close-knit crime. And I think even the family agrees with that. They think that it's got to be someone that is very close to them, or either someone that was monitoring them, watching their patterns, coming to understand those over an extended period of time. There's a big question that we don't have answered in this, guys. And if this was a homicide investigation, I think it would have been put out there already. Was there any sign of breaking and entering? When I first started looking at this place, one of the things that struck me is, in terms of storefronts, this would be a pretty hard place to kind of break into. We've got a lot of brick. And look at the other businesses here, all glass fronts, big giant glass windows, glass. This is just almost a solid brick wall with a couple of smaller windows and a door. However, when you go walking around to the side, pretty easily accessible windows here, a back door here that is purely glass. I'm also wondering about, I don't know if there's apartments up here. Like, it's a pretty big structure. I understand that they say that there's an apartment up there that he would use, but there's an additional level. Like, I don't know if any of this is rented out. Is there tenants that are involved in this place in some way? It doesn't look like it has its own entrance for that. So I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know. So rumor mill, gambling debt, son possibly being involved. And another thing that kind of worries me about that is the location of where the son lives from this isn't very far. And where the car is found, is that all within walking distance? It is. Mob involvement has kind of been brought up around this. And then I found one local on Reddit who says, no, the mob isn't around here anymore. They used to be, but there's nothing like that going on here now. Another person on Reddit says, I've lived here my whole life. Yes, it's absolutely still going on here. And people all over the place that are basically saying there is some form of cover up, or there's some reason why law enforcement isn't processing this case properly. The rumor mill is spinning very, very fast around this case, and especially back at that time. So the mayor makes a comment on it himself. The bloody clues, along with the passing days without a trace of the restaurant owner, have apparently fed a feverish rumor mill in the town where Robert Barron's uncle, Vincent Barron, told ABC that everyone knows everyone. Old Forge Mayor Robert Mulkerin has advised his citizens to end their relentless and often unfounded speculations about the case. Unfortunately, people do fill in the blanks with their own speculation, the rumor goes wild. Social media perpetuates that. People just need to be mindful and respectful of what they post and rumors. So I just wanted to call those out, because if you go looking into this on any of the discussion boards, you're going to see all these different theories. We want to boil it down to the known information. And that's part of what the challenge is here. Quite honestly, yes, the DA's been talking, but with the level of detail that we're getting, this rumor mill, it could be said, is being fed by the way they're handling this case. We don't even know if there was a robbery that happened here. Based on what his family says, Wednesdays, not a very busy day for them. Probably would have had a couple $100. They're an all cash business. Would have had a couple $100 on him at most. Is that couple $100, is it there? Was there a place where, most businesses might have a little safe, or at least an envelope where they put the day's earnings? Was that still in its normal place, or was that taken? That's a very key piece of information. And quite honestly, a lot of these rumors could fall to the wayside if that information came out. Yes, we did find that there was a robbery. There was breaking and entry. They did take money. There was other valuables in the apartment that are now missing. But we're not getting that at all. And not hearing any of that, it's hard, because my mind wants to swing to the other side and say, okay, well, obviously this was not a robbery, because we're not hearing that there was breaking and entry. There's things missing. And it's not really fair to do that as well. It just feels like communication from law enforcement on this case has been very not super detailed. And because of that, you are going to have the rumor mill. You're leaving all that space for the rumors to spin in all those different directions. And then, of course, you've got this thing with, the son is a part owner in the business. If this was a straight up homicide investigation, would that be another indicator of someone that should be investigated? Yes, absolutely. But did the son really benefit? The business has been closed. So not that I see. I don't think the son benefited from this in any way. The son's mother, Robert's wife, still alive. So it's not like the son fell into some giant landfall inheritance or something like that. I don't know. It's really, really tough to kind of get my head around what's going on in this case, and the rumor mill that is spinning around it as well. Family makes appeal. This is a little later, a few months later in 2017. 2 months later, his wife, son, and 2 daughters say they still have very little information about what happened to Robert. I think we were just touching on that. There's just so little detail that's coming out at this point. You don't know who you can trust now, said his son, Bobby. It's a whole different world, and my father never could adapt to that way of thinking. I would mention to him numerous times, we need to get security cameras in here. He would just kind of brush it off. There's robberies around here all the time, said his daughter, Brittany. No one person gets taken out of their business. I mean, it's wild. It's mind-boggling. It's an interesting point she's making. Like, if this was just a straight-up robbery, someone goes in, says, give me your money. Like, especially if it's after that kind of day, he's only got a couple $100. Is that part of why this is a robbery gone wrong situation? Is it he tries to tell them that, here's the $200 we made for the day, and the person is not content with that and things escalate? The Barons have a simple appeal to whoever may hold the key to finding Robert. This man has a family. You didn't only harm him, you harmed an entire family, his daughter Nicole said. Please have a heart and come forward. Please. Now, if this wasn't hurtful enough to the family, there's also a second crime that kind of gets discovered around this as well. A missing persons investigation led detectives to another crime affecting this same family. Investigator found tens of thousands of dollars stolen from an elderly woman while they were investigating an entirely different case. Sharon Grisenda turned herself in for allegedly stealing from a woman in her care. That woman, Helen Barron, is the mother of a missing man, Robert Barron. Grisenda was hired in 2015 to care for Helen. The court papers accuse her of forging checks from the elderly woman. The victim's son, not Robert, obviously Robert's brother, heard that his mother may have owed the IRS some money. He reviewed his mother's accounts, and then he learned that her balances were way too low. That's when they found this information. It looked like someone was writing checks in her name. They turned it over to the district attorney's office, and they pressed charges and took action. Quote, "You just don't like to see people who are hurting deal with more pain. Obviously, this is stress, fear, pain, anguish for an older woman. You just don't like to see anyone suffer. It adds more to the misery this poor family is already suffering," said DA Scanlon. So it's kind of interesting to me because, there's even the family at this point is being very critical of law enforcement and the investigation. But in this instance, we see them kind of hand some information over to the DA's office, and the DA takes very quick action. As a matter of fact, this woman she gets charges filed, she goes to court, she gets sentenced. Sharon Grisenda sentenced to 11 to 23 months in county prison and ordered to pay back more than $36,000 that she had stolen from this family. Also to point out, investigators do say that they don't believe this is related to Robert Barron's case at all. But just amazing to think about what this family is going through around all this. And to have something else like that, I mean, talk about a curveball. Now, in 2018, May of 2018, it seems like for some reason, and I don't have a good understanding of what prompts this, but detectives kind of go back to the restaurant and start looking at things again. Police and detectives from the DA's office continued to investigate. Old Forge police and members of the county DA's office spent Wednesday morning outside Gigerelli's restaurant in Old Forge. They took new pictures and looked around. After spending at least a half hour outside the restaurant, investigators moved to an apartment building in the 400 block of Sussex Street. This is where Robert Barron's son has an apartment. So obviously, something is being considered here about his son, at least the location of his son's home. Does that necessarily mean that they're looking at Bobby? Not necessarily, because something else is part of this story is that Robert actually took his son home. So is there something that they need to understand about the path that maybe the vehicle would have traveled? Maybe they're trying to figure out distance traveled, so then they can estimate if, the distance that was traveled after the car was probably stolen from the pizza place makes sense. I don't know. I think there's other reasons that this information could be being collected. It's really interesting to me that it's happening this much later. It almost sounds to me like I'm wondering if some type of tip was called in or something seemed to nudge the investigation at this point. Crews spray painted a T by a water main, took more pictures outside the building, and even walked along a dirt path through some brush. Now, I mean, if you look at it from the other side, could they be investigating someone walking back to Bobby's house? I think that's a possibility as well. The third stop brought crews to an alley behind the UPS store on Main Street. That was followed by stops and pictures on Foundry Street, Connell Street, and Elio Gigerelli Drive, which are all within about 1 to 2 miles from each other. Just to bring it up on a map so you get, and once again, this is just really highlighting this case feels so close. Like everything about this case is happening, and even what's being looked at, just really smack in the center of this neighborhood. So we know from the previous map that, less than a mile south is where the car would be found. Now we're kind of moving up north a little bit. Here's Sussex Street, so Bobby's apartment, somewhere in that area. And then here is the UPS. I couldn't find a UPS store, but it says a UPS access point location for Main Street is right here. Kind of makes sense in terms of what they're describing. And what I'm wondering about that, I don't know if there's cameras here. I don't know if they found some footage maybe in reviewing these cameras where they said, oh, we got someone that's walking by at 1 o'clock in the morning. Actually, it's kind of interesting because we are going to be talking about some other footage, but I don't think it's from that far up. We are going to be talking about some footage that's within what's described as a few blocks of the restaurant, and this is certainly out of that range. But yeah, all this is just, it's so close. Everything that's happening around this case is really, really centered on this area. 2 years later, and here is a picture of his wife, Maria, standing in front of the restaurant. Gigerelli's hasn't had a customer in nearly 2 years, lying locked and dormant as a mystery surrounding its beloved owner remains unsolved. Family and friends feared Barron had been abducted or beaten in a botched robbery and spoke of his fighting spirit, but Barron's car was found about a mile away by the Lackawanna River. Maria Barron, 57 years old, is all but sure that her husband is dead. She stood outside the restaurant. Quote, "It's going to be bittersweet, but I don't think we can sell it. This is a landmark for over 100 years now." Robert Barron's family purchased Gigerelli's in 1961, keeping the name and the pizza. He grew up in Old Forge, an affable workaholic who poured himself into the restaurant. For his children, the restaurant was a second home. When daughter Brittany went off to LaSalle University, he called and texted her every day. Gigerelli's was a cash business, the family said, but the most Robert would have been carrying after a Wednesday night was a few $100. Brittany thinks that her dad wouldn't have put up with scumbags trying to rob the place. So could that be potential? Like, even if he did have a few $100s, he wasn't going to give it up to them? That's another aspect where this could be a robbery gone wrong situation. Once again, I'm just sitting with the question of, do we have any signs of forced entry? Are we assuming that this is someone that was sitting outside and waited for him to get back, knowing that he would get back around that time in particular? I don't know how regular that was. A lot of questions. The mayor tried to quell rumors about the case, but on the Finding Robert Barron Facebook page, people have named names, and the Barrons don't mind mentioning them. They believe several people took part in what turned out to be a botched robbery. So I don't want to be naming the names, especially if they haven't been mentioned in major media sources, but I'm trying to get a gist of what they think happened. I do have some highlights from a comment here. Once again, we're off of articles at this point. I just want to put that around this. This is what's being discussed on the Finding Robert Barron Facebook page. This is what happened in this case. These higher up people have covered up the case. There are 3 suspects. They're not even suspects. They are scumbags that did this to Bobby. There is video evidence, witnesses, statements from these individuals' family members confirming that they were out that night and they didn't come home until 6 a.m. and their clothes were covered in blood and mud and they were all out of breath. So again, I ask, why has there not been one arrest made? It's absolutely sickening, and my heart is broken for the Barron family. This case needs to be talked about every day until it's solved. So there's a lot of things in here. They're talking about footage. I think we're going to be able to review what they're talking about with that. Talking to family members saying that kind of stuff. We've confirmed that they came home in the morning. They had blood. They had mud on them. It seems like this type of information, depending on when it came into the circle of the family or the Facebook group or however this information got pulled together, that seems like stuff that their investigators should be able to track down, right? Especially if we've got video evidence. Can they confirm that, hey, yeah, these people are around the restaurant at that time? Now, even if they can confirm that, is that necessarily enough to file charges? Absolutely not. It's public area. These guys could be walking around for a bunch of other reasons. It's very unfortunate we don't have cameras as part of this restaurant, but Bobby said his father just never really believed that that was necessary for the type of business that they were running there. Continuing at the Inquirer and Daily News reached out to 2 of those men to ask why their names are being connected to Barron's case. Both lived in Old Forge at the time. The men have not been identified because they have not been named publicly as suspects. "Are you paying me?" one responded. The other man did not return requests for comment. District Attorney Mark Powell, in a statement, said the initial investigation into Barron's disappearance was conducted by his predecessor, Shane Scanlon. So here, I personally felt like I breathed a little sigh of relief, just knowing that the role of DA has been transferred. Someone else now has that. Maybe we're getting some fresh eyes. maybe a different perspective. If there is some worry of ties that, were covering up things or impeding the investigation before, maybe those ties, what's the likelihood that they would still be connected to this new person coming in? Is there a chance? Yes, absolutely. But I think there's also a chance that this case gets a fair shake at this point. If there are things that impeded the investigation kind of on that front, as the rumor mill is suggesting, is it too late at this point because, the investigation was mishandled at the time and you can't go back in time and redo the things that you would want to do? Is definitely still a question that's at play. But new DA, what does he say? Quote, "Since I took office as district attorney in 2018, we have gone over every aspect of the investigation with a fine-tooth comb, what was done, what wasn't done, and what needed to be redone. And we followed through wherever we felt it was necessary and appropriate." So honestly, it could be that him getting that role in 2018, I don't know when he took office there, but that's the same time where all of a sudden we have the investigators back out at the location. They're taking pictures. They're looking into things differently. So it could be that it was kind of a relaunch of the investigation that happened around the new DA coming in. And maybe that's why we had that movement. Continuing at NBCnews.com, what does Nicole think about the chances of finding her father? "I do have hope that my dad will be found, but I do not have hope that my dad will be found alive." So we've heard it from the mother. We've now heard it from one of the daughters. It seems like the family is pretty certain that they know that he isn't with us any longer. Nicole and Brittany were both living away from home at the time. Brittany was attending LaSalle University in Philadelphia. She talked to her dad on the phone earlier that day for about an hour. She said that he was looking to buy a new car in Philadelphia. They talked until his phone died and then continued their conversation later that night by text until about 10 p.m. "I wanted to call him again later, but I had a job interview the next morning and just needed to get some sleep," she said. "I wish I would have. That was the last time I talked to my dad." Brittany said she figured she'd hear from her dad right before her interview to wish her good luck, or right after, but he never called. Nicole, the other daughter, lived in New York City. She told Dateline that she also spoke to her father on January 25th. "I remember I was actually going to buy a vacuum cleaner that day. We just had a normal conversation, but I can't believe that was the last time I spoke to my dad." Once again, this is just reaffirming, even as time is passing, the family believes this was a botched robbery. "This wasn't just someone random," Nicole said. "This was someone who knew his routine, knows us, was watching. I don't think it was a stranger off the street who would pinpoint him in the dead of winter. I think my dad walked in on someone trying to rob the place, and my dad fought back," she said. "He wasn't going down without a fight, and I think that cost him his life." The things that Brittany are saying here, and I'm not hearing anything else from them that helps support this, but that question of, was there any breaking and entering that happened around the building? Why would you think that someone was in there robbing the place unless there was some sign of breaking and entering? Kind of curious about that, if maybe the family does have more detail. The Barron family told Dateline they're frustrated with how the investigation is going, and they believe Robert could have been found 3 years ago. "We would know something by now if they had handled it correctly," Brittany said. "The evidence is there, yet nothing is being done." And what is some of the more compelling pieces of that evidence? Finally, we're going to get to this footage that we've been kind of talking about through this episode. Robert Barron's family is hoping a surveillance video taken the night he went missing can provide long-awaited answers in the case. This video was released to Eyewitness News, showing two men walking near South Main Street in Old Forge near the restaurant shortly after midnight on January 26th, the night that he went missing. One man is wearing shorts. Another man is in the shadows, and he is pulling a suitcase. It's interesting he's wearing shorts because even in the footage, you'll see there's literally pockets of snow on the ground. It's obviously not a warm day out there. Quote, "There are two men outside the night of the tragedy, which tells me he ripped off his warm clothes, got rid of them to take the evidence away. There's the other suspect, and he's wheeling a suitcase on Main Street in the dead of winter on the night of the tragedy," explained Nicole. Nicole says that a suitcase was also missing from the apartment above Gigerelli's. So they think there's a chance that in this footage is the suitcase. Let's go ahead and just run some of the footage really quick. So the man in shorts, he almost looks like he's looking for something. And then up above, we've got the guy with the suitcase. It looks like the guy's smoking a cigarette. There's a little light kind of in his hand. And the suitcase, I mean, just the way this guy's taking it, this looks like a pretty big guy. The suitcase looks heavy. But, you know, I mean, we're looking at black squares here. Like there's just, it's really hard to make out any detail there. Down to the guy with the shorts, like he's kind of pacing around this area. And it just strikes me that it does look like he's looking at the ground. Like, I don't know if he's just walking back and forth out there. And you can see, you know, the pockets of snow I mentioned. It's not a ton. There's not a lot. Like, you know, I live in an area that gets pretty cold, and I'm surprised. I'll see people wearing shorts at times where I'm like, I can't believe you're wearing shorts. But so that's the footage. We know that there's at least 2 men walking around that time of night in the right area. And one of them has a suitcase. There is a suitcase missing from the home. That's the first confirmation that we get that maybe something is missing from the home. Is there more? I really have to wonder. The family first saw the video back in 2019. Family members questioned why it did not help lead to an arrest in the case. Whether they were involved or not, it raises suspicion, so they're definitely worth looking at and investigating, said Nicole. The videos are part of our investigation, but I cannot comment specifically about who was interviewed or the details of the investigation, said DA Mark Powell. Barron tells Eyewitness News her family was told by investigators several years ago that the investigators know who the men are in the video. So the men have been identified. I'm almost certain they would have been interviewed. But we don't have confirmation or any further information on if they were interviewed. What did they say? Did they share anything? Are these guys possibly 2 of those 3 names that have been kicked around on Facebook? Are they maybe 2 of the names that were reached out to by the news source, who then had one of them ask if he was being paid? We don't know. These could be other men as well. As the years tick by, we get to 2021 and some comments from the family. Maria said, "It just doesn't go away because this isn't fair to any of us. And it has to be a person that is close to us who's involved in this. You know, I constantly have visions of what went on in there that night, even though I don't truly know," said his daughter, Nicole. "I have horrific and morbid thoughts of what went on in there that night. It's going to haunt me the rest of my life." And finally, his daughter, Brittany, said, "It's the most earthly justice I guess you can get to have these people caught and arrested, and they should serve life or worse. My dad should be found, and at least he should be found and put to rest wherever he is." Family obviously very hurt by all this. There is a $15,000 reward that's available. Of course, we've had a number on the screen for the DA's office this whole time. If you need to remain anonymous for any reason, please call CrimeStoppers. We have their number in the description box down below. And then we get to an update in 2022. A sign still hangs outside of Gigerelli's restaurant on Main Street in Old Forge. It now reads, 5 years, no Bob, no arrests. Why? It's a one-word question with a lot of aspects to it. This case has some information that's been released, but it doesn't feel like it's the right type of information to be particularly helpful to the investigation. I really think that current investigators on this case should think about what's the piece that we're missing that we need help with, and try to find some way to ask that of the public. I'm not really seeing that. I mean, as a matter of fact, a bunch of the later press was really just the family kind of talking about how they're hurt by what's going on, that they don't think the investigation has been done properly, and then kind of the DA just saying, it's an active investigation, it's an active investigation. I understand, but think of all the questions that have popped up as we've gone through this here today. And each one of those unanswered questions is leading to this. I know the rumor mill's still churning. The person that told me about this case basically told me about that aspect as well. There's still a lot of suspicion that something is stopping justice in this case. Who called the pizza shop? Who was the person that was harassing him? That's easy, especially we're not talking a case that's happening in the 1960s or 1970s where, phone records aren't exactly great. This was 2017. So finding whoever was calling the pizza shop regularly, unless they were using a blocked number or something like that, and even then you could kind of work with that, there should be some aspect of them trying to figure out who that person was. Is that person part of any of this? Who knows? Cell phone analysis. Yes, his phone was left behind, but who was he communicating with? Was there something else going on in his life? Maybe his family didn't know about it. This is a guy that if he wanted to spend a couple nights away from home, it sounds like he could have easily done that. Is there some other aspect of his life that's coming into play here? How do you learn about that? Cell phone, I think, would be a really strong place. Was anything actually stolen? We keep hearing from the family as the years go by that they think this is a botched robbery. It'd be really easy for law enforcement to confirm that. It would be really easy actually for the family to even come out and just say, we can tell you guys, yeah, money was taken, valuables were taken. We think that's why they needed the suitcase. There was a bunch of stuff they took from the apartment. We're not getting any of that level of understanding. We are hearing the family saying that they think it's a robbery. If it is, was there signs of a break-in? Are there other tenants that live in that building or around that area? Are there people that moved away, people that weren't acting the same after this occurrence? The people in the footage, the two guys in the footage, there's some questions I have about that because we know the vehicle is removed from the scene. So if the vehicle is removed from the scene, why are there two guys walking around? And that footage was supposedly taken within a few blocks of the restaurant. Why would they be on foot? Wouldn't they be in the car? Is there possibly someone else involved? At that point, you'd have to think there's at least three people if the two guys have anything to do with this, because there'd be someone else that took the car. It would just be weird. Why would you have one person, okay, we're going to load him up in the car and I'm going to go take Robert somewhere and you guys go walk around the neighborhood. One of those guys really doesn't look like he's going anywhere in particular. I don't know. And then if, the bag thing, one of the things I was concerned with in that footage is the bag does look heavy. And we have seen cases before where a bag has been used to hide a body. If that's the case, how would the blood have gotten onto the car? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I don't know that that's what we're looking at in this case in particular. Was there any DNA from the car? Did they fully process that car? Because it seems like someone else was driving it. Could they figure that person out? Touch DNA, fingerprints, all that kind of stuff. Once again, no mention. Was there any footage captured showing the car's movement? We know they're reviewing cameras because they're finding this other stuff. We have the footage of these two guys, but we know that the car is likely is very strongly part of this story. So is there footage of the car? The car's movements. Can we track it? There's businesses. This is kind of a neighborhood where there's you'd have a bunch of houses and then kind of a business and then another bunch of houses and a business. So it's a little bit mixed in terms of the opportunity for cameras to be on the path, but this is Main Street. There are businesses in that direction down towards where the car is left. Could they have collected footage and started to kind of put together tracing where the car was? They might have all this, guys. I'm just asking the questions that I'm left with. Was the water near where the car was found searched? Maybe it wasn't about trying to hide Robert in the water. Maybe it was about hiding something else that was part of the crime or a piece of evidence or something along those lines in the water. And why clean up the scene? This one, it just really blows my mind. And I try to not lean too much, especially when you have a rumor mill kind of spinning around this one. We know that early on there was suspicion about the son because we've got warning indicators just in terms of his relationship to his dad's business. Who benefits? Who's the last person to see the victim? Who's the person that called it in? He's ticking a few check boxes for this is a person that should be investigated. the big one that I'm really stuck with is cleaning up that scene, especially if it was cleaned to the point where they weren't even really sure that a big terrible attack had happened in there until they brought in the luminol. That means that the cleaning was probably pretty decent. Why? If this was truly just a robbery gone wrong, why are you going to go to that length? Just get out. Staying there and, using cleaning agents and stuff. I mean, you're touching other things. You're increasing the likelihood you're going to leave behind some prints or something along those lines. It really doesn't make a lot of sense for a stranger that's in an environment, if they are thinking about trying to get away with this crime, which is, why else would you think about cleaning up the scene? I don't understand it. I don't understand why someone outside of the very close circle would go to, honestly, I don't understand why anyone would go to that length. Outside of the possibility that it could be a family member. It just could. Is the son being investigated is really a big question. And quite honestly, if he's not being investigated and they have ruled him out in a confirmed way, I think it's pretty terrible that they haven't made a public statement about that, because that rumor has been spinning around from the start. I don't think it went away, especially when 2018 comes around and they're spray painting markings in front of the apartment where the son lived. If anything, that probably spun it up even harder in terms of rumor. So it's interesting to me that there isn't a formal statement that has come out to say, like, that was something we were investigating, but we've closed that out. We don't have a person of interest, or specifically, Bobby is not a person of interest in this case. Is there a reason why we're not seeing that? I don't know. We've seen a few instances where law enforcement will actually even occasionally name a person and say, we think that they really have something to do with this case. And then it turns out to be incorrect. So it's one of those things where you can't really rely on any set expectation for what they're going to do in these types of instances. In the links down below, I'll have a couple of conversation threads you can go to. Reddit, actually, I'm not the biggest fan of the conversations that happen over there, but this one was pretty decent. Gave me some insight into the area. If you want to check that out, it'll be in the links down below. And of course, Web Sleuths, where if you want to get into a bit of a more respectful conversation, much more facts-based and driven, you can go check out Web Sleuths as well. And if you don't do anything else, at least take a moment, show this family some support by going to Facebook and following the Finding Robert Barron page. I'll have a link to that near the top of everything down below. I really appreciate you guys. We can't do this without the support of several amazing people. If you want to be one of those people, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even buy us a coffee like Shauna Blackwood did recently. Again, thank you so much for all the support, Shauna. Obviously, you've probably noticed we don't jam these things with commercials. We run one at the beginning, maybe one at the end, and that's it. We can't do that without support, and we really appreciate you guys out there that are doing it. As a matter of fact, a big thank you to new patrons, We Graceful Few and Liz V. Thank you so much for signing up on Patreon. Take care, everyone. Have a safe weekend. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new case cracked right here on the Lord and Arts channel.